In this video, we're going to introduce polynomials. Now, polynomials are an important concept in algebra because we can add, subtract, multiply, divide, graph, do all types of things with polynomials. So polynomials are an important concept, so we need to know right off what a polynomial is. In the definition, it says it's a collection of terms. It's terms put right beside each other. Well, now we need to know what a term is. Here are the things a term can be. It can be a number, it can be a variable, or it can be a product or quotient of a number and a variable. Here are some examples of what I mean. 5 is a term. Any variable by itself is a term. Or you can have the number and the variable together like this. This denotes that you're multiplying these together. This together is a term. So is a quotient like this. Quotient means divide. That means if you write a variable and a number this way using a division bar, that is also a term. You can have more than one variable. As long as it's all pushed together, showing that you're all multiplying this together, that is one term right there. This is one term because it's all being multiplied together. So a number, a variable, or any type of product or quotient is a term. A polynomial is a collection of these terms put beside each other. Now, terms in a polynomial are separated by positive and negative signs. So we're going to look at some examples here, and we're going to determine how many terms each one of these polynomials has. I'm going to look at this first example. What's the first term in this polynomial? 2x. What's the second term? 3y. What's the last term? -9. Remember, this positive and negative sign go with each one of these. So how many terms does this have? It has 3. 2x is one term. 3y is another term. And this term on the end is -9. That's another term. This polynomial has 3 terms. How many terms does this polynomial have? It's got 2. The first term is 2x squared. All that pushed together is one term. Terms are separated by positive and negative signs. What's the second term? -25. So how many terms does this have? It has 2. The first one is 2x squared. The second one is -25. Remember, the sign goes with each one of these terms and each one of these numbers. Our next example. How many terms does this polynomial have? It has 1. All this pushed together like this is one term. Remember, terms are separated by positive and negative signs. This is all one term right there. Polynomials with 1, 2, and 3 terms have special names. These are the only ones that have special names. If it has one term, it's called a monomial because the prefix on this means 1. Just like something that has 2 terms, a polynomial that has 2 terms is a binomial because bi means 2. Tri means 3. That means a trinomial has 3 terms. We only have names for these 3 because we're talking about 3 dimensions. We only have 3 dimensions, and so we only have names for these first 3. This is like a first dimension, a second dimension, and a third dimension. If it has more than 4 or 4 terms, we're simply going to call it a polynomial because poly means many. Let's talk about a special case. I cannot have a variable in the denominator because the denominator cannot be 0. It might be 0. So if you have a polynomial and there's a variable in the denominator, that's not a polynomial, because that term could be undefined. And why would it be undefined? It being a variable, it could be any number. It could be 1, 3, 9, but when it becomes 0, you can't divide by 0. So therefore, if there is a variable in the denominator, like this example, you're going to write that this is not a polynomial. This is not a polynomial. It looks like it may have 3 terms, but the reason it's not a polynomial is because z might be equal to 0, and you can't divide by 0. It kind of negates everything else here about this being some type of polynomial. So looking at these examples again, what name could we give to this polynomial right here? This would be a trinomial because it has three terms. This one right here would be called a binomial because it has two terms. This one right here would be a monomial because it has one term. And if you see any that have a variable in the denominator, you're going to write it's not a polynomial. If I gave you one that had four terms, you would just simply call it a polynomial. Another important aspect of a polynomial is the degree. So we need to look or be able to tell what the degree of each term is. The degree of a term is determined by the power of the variable part. So when I'm looking at this one, what is the degree of this term? This one would be to the fourth degree. I'll look at my exponent of my variable, and that would be to the fourth degree. 31x to the third power, that would be to the third degree. 6x squared, second degree. So what about one where we can't see the exponent? If you can't see the exponent, remember there's an exponent of 1 right there. So the degree of this term right here, first degree. If there is no variable, we call something that doesn't have a variable a constant. So to find the degree of a term, look at the power of the variable. If there is more than one variable, then add the powers together of each variable to get the degree of the term. So if I'm given this one right here, to figure out the degree of this term, I need to take this 3 and this 2 and add them together. So the degree of this term right here would be the fifth degree. That term is raised to the fifth degree. The degree of a polynomial is the degree of its highest term. So looking at this binomial, because it has 2, I would look at, so the degree of this entire polynomial would be the sixth degree. What's the degree of this polynomial? I would look for the highest exponent, which is right here, second degree. The degree of the polynomial also gives it other special names. If it has a degree of 1, it's linear. A degree of 2, it's a quadratic. And a degree of 3, it's cubic. These words kind of give you an idea of what kind of graph it may look like or other properties about the polynomial. Now we'll look at these examples and figure out whether they're linear, cubic, or quadratic. To determine that, I need to figure out what the degree of this polynomial is. The highest degree is 2, something that has a degree of 2. This polynomial is quadratic. It's also a trinomial, but according to degree, it's going to be a quadratic. How many terms does this one have? It has 1. What's the degree of this? It has a degree of 1. There's an exponent of 1 right there. It says it has an exponent of 1. That's the highest degree in that polynomial. According to the degree, what type of polynomial is it? It's linear. How many terms does this one have? This one has 2 terms. What's the highest degree of those terms? 3. If it has a degree of 3, this polynomial is cubic. It's also a binomial because it has 2 terms. This one is binomial. Does it fit in one of these 3 categories? No. It doesn't have a degree of 1, 2, or 3. This would be none of these. It would be not quadratic, not linear, and not cubic.